Well, good morning, church. Good morning. Today, on this All Saints Day, of course, I think of the saints who I call on in my own history. And perhaps the most formative person in my life was my grandmother, Mama May, as she was known, or Nana, as I called her. And my Nana was one of these very proper ladies who would be very upset with me at this moment for preaching in front of you without heels on. But she was a very refined woman of culture who wanted to make sure that her children and her grandchildren would know the ways that would create a path that would make life a little easier for us. And so I thought of my Nana this week in preparing my words for you, because my Nana had this very interesting way of infusing us with proper knowledge. So for example, we were not to put our elbows on the table. We were not to sing at the table. We were given all the rules, but they seemed reasonable. I realized that if I did put my elbows on the table, perhaps I might get some gravy on them. Or maybe I would tip the table over. And that there was some wisdom to things. But one day, I remember as we were traveling, flying down to our vacation spot in St. Martin down in the Netherlands Antilles of the Caribbean. This is where we went every August. And it's a long flight, apparently, for parents to take all these kids and all their nieces, all my cousins and everything, and we'd all go. And I'm sure we were a pain in the neck. And my grandmother decided to take a new tactic with us, and she said, you know what, let's try something today. Have you ever heard the saying, children should be seen and not heard? And she said this to us, and of course I was furious because I liked being heard. How dare my Nana tell me I could not be heard? And so she wanted me to be quiet. And now that I'm a parent, of course I understand where she was coming from. And no, I would not teach Shaylee this, I think. Maybe sometimes it'd be nice to see her, like when she's in church, and not hear her. But in general, I want her to find and know her voice and to feel strong in it, so I probably wouldn't say this to her. But I was thinking of my Nana this week as we traveled out into these vast plains and made our way to North Dakota this week. I thought, here's a time for me, preacher, one who always has words in my mouth, to be seen but not heard. It's a time for me to look and to be present, for as someone said, was it you, Stephanie? Someone said, you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. So I wanted to be there, as a number of us did, and even more would have loved to. It takes some resources to get to North Dakota on short notice, I will say. But I wanted to be there because it was important to show up for the people at Standing Rock. Now, of course, they are not the only tribe who are protesting ways in which their lands are being desecrated. It astonishes me, though I suppose it shouldn't, that we continue to be conquerors in native lands. We make promises and treaties, and then we just whittle away at them, thinking they won't pay attention, throwing alcohol at them and drugs and hoping that they won't notice. So I don't know how many of you are very well aware of what's going on at the Dakota Access Pipeline. Some of you know and some of you don't. I'll give you a little teeny primer because I learned a lot as I went. There is a land across the Dakotas, and of course across this entire country, that was promised to a number of tribes. And they had worked out in the Laramie Treaty of, I believe, 1847 or so, that basically what we call North and South Dakota would be given to these tribes. But of course, we've been whittling away at that for years. And eventually we wound up with a reservation, the one that's in question now, which straddles over the line of North and South Dakota, just south of Bismarck, North Dakota. And on this land, well, North Dakota has such oil-rich resources right now that there's tons of money. It's actually, I believe, the fastest growing economy in the entire country up in North Dakota. So there's a lot of pressure to drag what we can from this rich earth, right? to feed our need for fuel. And as we do so, they need a pipeline to get the oil to us. And so they realized that if they could lay the pipeline through a route, that we'd be able to get it faster, and there's tons of money at stake, right? Now, they thought that they would put the pipeline through Bismarck. But the people of Bismarck organized, and these are white people, and they said no, and then they said, okay, never mind, of course, we won't. They listened. They said, well, instead we'll put it through the native territory, because they don't have as much power. Maybe they didn't say that out loud, but it's exactly what happened. So they rerouted it to go through the Standing Rock lands and under the Missouri River, which is this great source of water to all these people. And the Standing Rock people said no. And they said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll move it north of your reservation so that you won't be touched. But it still goes through the Missouri River. And they said, no, that goes through the lands of our ancestors, where they had planted and where we had many battles and where many have died. That is holy ground. You can't put the pipeline through there either. And they said, basically, we'll forget you. It's private land and we can do what we want. So then some of us say, well, if it's private land, maybe that landowner should be able to do what they want. But again, remember, this was land that was promised in many treaties to this tribe. And then when they took the treaties away, they said, well, it won't be reservation land, but we'll make it instead a public trust. It'll be public land, and nobody will touch it, don't worry. And then the folks in the tribe said, well, what can we do? So they took this public land, and eventually they sold it off to a private buyer who knew, who was smart, and got the land, and then now they can do whatever they want with it, allegedly. So the tribe is saying, no, you've done enough. When will you listen to us? When will you stop pillaging our land? When will you stop telling us that we cannot honor the sacred in the ways that we need to? So as I went and I saw, for the first time really, because I haven't spent that much time in rural places, just this expanse of vast plain, where you could look and see nothing. I thought, wow, I can see why someone might think it would be okay to do something here, because there's nothing around here. Until I remembered my purpose. And I learned that I needed to listen to the sound of the land, to the sound of the holy, and see just what was so important about this space. And there were stories to be heard. In the Bible, we hear about the story of Moses, as he was keeping his flock, keeping the flock of Jethro. He was taking care of these sheep, and he stumbles across this place, and he sees a burning bush through which the Spirit of God speaks to him and reveals God's holy name. But before the revelation, what did the bush tell Moses to do but to remove the sandals from his feet, because he was standing on holy ground. He was standing on holy ground. And what I felt when my prayers took me to this place is that I was rolling through holy ground, and I needed to take the sandals boots from my feet, for there was something to learn. Now, a lot of native cultures will say that the ancestors sing to us from these very grounds, and that every bit of ground has a story to tell about the souls that have crossed it, about the animals who have grazed upon it, and of the people and the battles that have been fought years and years and years. And as we went to this land, we learned that indeed there had been a number of different tribes that called this area, now called Standing Rock, their home. And there had been skirmishes, and there had been battles, as if, as someone said, who would put a pipeline through Gettysburg? And that's precisely what our country is allowing to happen up there. And so we listened. And we remembered our own ancestors. And as Stephanie Spellers pointed out as she spoke to this gathering of 500 and something clergy, and then way more others who joined us for this protest, She said, I had to remember my own ancestors. But for a number of us, our remembrances are blocked off. Now, this is an interesting thing, because so many dominant cultures, particularly European culture, will find the strength for its dominance in its history. And they know how important it is to know your history. And this is why that history has been robbed from a lot of us. On Family Tree Day, when I was a little girl, anyone else go through this? You might not know what I was going to say. On Family Tree Day, as a little girl, they would say, can you just write your family tree? And I would do mine, and I could go back about as far as my great-grandparents. I could go back about 3 generations. But from that point on, the kinds of records that are available for a number of my ancestors have to do with their crop yield, with names that are made up, with zero history of precisely where they came from. I can find my great-grandmother's name, and I have some records for her. It says she was born in Indian Territory in Virginia, and that's about as far as I can go. I don't know what tribe. I have other great-grandparents who were Jewish and who had a bastard child, so they didn't want their names to be known. I have no idea who they are. I can only go back a few generations, and there's a way that people have done this erasure that takes our power away. We don't get to claim those same ancestral lines in a visible way. And can I just tell you how hard that is? How difficult it is to not know where to look for the stories of the ancestors, or how to hear their voice or the language in which they would speak. There in Standing Rock, in a little beautiful church, we heard a deacon of the church, his name's Brandon, talk about how he is trying to reclaim the Lakota language because his parents and grandparents have been told, forget the language, learn your English, that's the way of respectability. And we learned stories again and again of people sent off to what are called boarding schools. Have you heard of these boarding schools? Sounds kind of nice, but what it actually was a way of erasure. It was a place where they would send children, quote, to take the savage out of them, but let the man reside. Cultural genocide. And so there were tons of people who would stand up and speak and said, I too went to boarding school, as they tried to take my history away from me, as they tried to rip aside all of the stories of my ancestors, and now I am trying to bring it back. They thought that all this could be forgotten. But what the Reverend Canon Spellers reminded us of is that forgetting is what allows us to get to the point of Standing Rock. That forgetting is how we can continue to pillage as if those days where we had smallpox blankets and whatever else were all historical. Standing Rock is the new smallpox blanket, my friends. Amen. But Jesus said, blessed are you. Blessed are you. And I believe that if the ancestors had a chant that we could hear, they would want us to hear that too. Blessed are you. Blessed are you who mourn, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you because God can take mourning and make something beautiful. Blessed are you when they tell you that who you are is not important, when they try to take from you your very name. Blessed are you when you don't have any clue where you have come from, but you know that you have come from somewhere and that you are important and that God will bless you, because blessed are you, the ancestors chant. Blessed are you who are meek, for you shall inherit the earth. But my friends, in order for someone to inherit the earth, we need an earth to give them. And so, from that very place of blessing, it is the role of the Christian to be a blessing, to bless the very soil from which the ancestors' blood was shed, to hold that soil as sacred, and to know that all of the earth is the Lord's garden.